What is the date? The 18th of January here in the Judiciary Committee, and we are honored to have Justice Reiber in this morning to introduce some excellent initiatives that are going on that you're leading, and we're very excited to have you here this morning.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. I'm just trying to think back the last time I was physically present in this room. I'm not sure. I think it.
Last biennium, I think.
Yeah. Probably 2019, right?
That's probably right.
Yeah.
I think that's probably right. And it's so, and I mean, I don't want to say it's a relief, but it's a nice feeling to actually have face-to-face contact with people to talk about the important issues that the state has and that you have on your minds. I know you've got such important work to do in this committee, and we do too. And I am a big fan of communicating across what we always used to refer to as silos in state government, and I think still are referred to as silos. And when I came in 2003, not having served on the bench before that, came directly out of private practice, and not having served in government, for that matter, there was a lot of talk about silos and about maintaining this. It's very understandable, the integrity of the democratic structure, of our constitutional structure, of the separation of powers, checks and balances. These are concepts that are extremely important. But one of the things that I have realized in the work that I do is that if we are not communicating across these boundaries in an effective way with regard to certain matters, as a matter of fact, I did some reading recently. I wish I could cite it to you because I'd love to tell you where I found it. But it is it was actually contemplated by the founders that we would communicate about certain issues. Look at, for instance, the judicial nominating process. That is a joint effort of all three branches. And in fact, the Judicial Nominating Board and the bar, by the way, just elected its three members under the law. I sent letters out just yesterday, as a matter of fact, to the attorneys who were elected by the bar. Sent a letter to the speaker, to the pro tem, sent a letter to the governor. And Jay Johnson wrote me back last night and said that they're in the throes of making their decision. The governor has two appointments to that body. And you all, I'm sure you were well aware, have 3 out of the House and 3 out of the Senate. One of the things I've always loved about that process, and I served for 6 years on that board myself way back when, is that by law, the majority on that board are lay people. There are no judges. There's no requirement that a judge sit on that board. There's no requirement that there be some official from the court administrator's office that is on that board, although they staff it for all intents and purposes. Anyway, that's a good example of where the Constitution provides for the cooperation and collaboration between all three branches. Funding is another one. That is something that is part of where we work together. And the example that I frankly like the best and I cite most frequently are the problems that we see in the communities around the state with addiction and alcoholism and behavioral health problems, low-level crimes. We're not talking about violent crimes, but low-level crimes where people recidivate and come back again and again and again into the justice system, whether it be the criminal justice system or, frankly, the family court system. But they're basic problems are not being addressed. One of the places where I think our state government, with you all, the efforts that you make, the efforts that we make, the cooperation of the executive branch, one of the places that we've made some advances is in this area with drug courts. We have 4 drug courts in the state. We've got a DUI court in Windsor County. We've got a family treatment court in Chittenden County. In our policy, people ask me with some frequency, what is it that the Supreme Court says about having, we want a drug court. If somebody says we want a drug court in our county, how do we do that? Well, we recognized several years ago that these are not top-down decisions that should be made. We cannot mandate to Orange County that it have a drug court if the folks in that county have not gathered around the idea themselves. And the reason that's so important is because it doesn't work if the prosecutor is not invested. It doesn't work if the public defenders are not invested. And by the way, it doesn't work if there are insufficient local services that are available to provide the kind of support that's needed. I sat in Rutland's drug court about 2 weeks ago, and I would invite, Mr. Chair, you've been in that courthouse, I know. We've been there together for meetings. Many of you have been in that now that I look around. You know that courthouse, the state courthouse, the Frank Mahady Courthouse. Why is it named after Judge McCaffrey? Because Frank McCaffrey ran that drug court in that courthouse for many, many years. But I sat in that drug court a few weeks ago, and I'll tell you, it's a very powerful scene that you witness there. At one point, Judge Valenti, John Valenti is the judge who's presiding over that court, said to one of the participants, and these are public proceedings, by the way, said to one of the participants, listen, we've been trying to get your attention now for 2, 3, 4 weeks, and you're not complying. You're not going to your sessions, your sessions you're supposed to go to. You're not out there looking for a job. I'm gonna put you in jail for 2 nights. And the guy said, Judge, isn't there something I can do that would change your mind? He said, no, I'm sorry. Whereupon there are 2 deputy sheriffs sitting on the side of the courtroom. One of them gets up and walks over and puts handcuffs on him. This is in front of all the others. You know, there are 18 others sitting in the back of the courtroom watching this. And it puts handcuffs on him and walks him out the back door. This is behavioral modification is what we're talking about, which is something that a prison doesn't do, but this kind of thing is as effective as I think we can possibly get. And by the way, one of the things I loved about that afternoon was the fact that the Rutland City police chief walked in unannounced about halfway through in his uniform and sat in the back and just witnessed the process. Now, this is a community that's got problems in this area. There's no question about it. But here we've got, and he was not there for any purpose other than to watch what was going on. And believe me, every person in that courtroom saw him do that. And at the end, Johnny Valenti said to a new admittee, basically, I want you to know that everybody here is on your team. There's the prosecutor, Ian Sullivan, the new Rutland County prosecutor. Ian Sullivan, who's going to prosecute you if you fall off the wagon. He's on your team. The defender's on your team. The probation and parole fellow who was there, the police officer who was there is on your team. I'm on your team. So this is the presence that it brings. And I think it's one of the things that's happening in the state that is that makes me hopeful about the serious problems, some of the serious problems that we have. I'll make one other comment. I've got a lot more I could say, but I wanted to talk to you about faith in the court system, the public's trust in the court system. Listen, I've got the same concerns about our institutions of democracy across the board, not just the courts, but my portfolio is the courts. And that's what I am most concerned about. And one of the things that I've been talking about is and I know, Mr. Chair, you asked me about the projects we have. I'd rather talk about this if you don't mind, just because it weighs on me. We have got a problem in this country with people losing faith in democracy, people losing faith in the institutions of democracy. And by the way, I talked to the governor about this when he was very first elected. So this is not new. This has been going on. How long has Governor Scott been in office? I think this is his fourth term coming up. Yeah. So if we go back 6 years, whatever that is, I remember meeting with him down at the transition office that he had. And I told him at that time, and he said he had the same concern. And then I've got this is a booklet that the National Center for State Courts puts out. And I got this in Washington at a meeting last fall in November. And happily, if you will, I think I'm happy about it, although I'm worried about it. One of the pages, and I'd be happy to leave this with you if you'd like. This is a national survey that they do. This is not Vermont specific by any means, so I don't want you to get that impression. But at the same time, I think it's somewhat telling. And I told Mike Banerjee, who's here with me, and clerks for me this year, I showed him this before we came over. The page that really got me in the solar plexus the question is, how much confidence do you have in each of the institutions? And then they have on the left column state legislature, governor, federal courts, U.S. Supreme Court, and state courts. And the date spread is 2012 is the first and 2022 is the second, so 10 years apart. And the state legislatures gone down 4 points from 59 to 55. The governors across the country now gone down again 5 points from 59 to 54. The federal courts have gone down from 73% in 2012 to 57% last year. The U.S. Supreme Court, this is the one that I felt like my horse kicked me, from 73% to 53%, 20 points in 10 years. The state courts happily have only gone down 7 points from 67 to 60%. But what I am saying is that I think part of the problem is that politics has gotten too much into the judicial selection process. And we witness, and this is not a partisan point, by the way. This happens on both sides of the aisle. This happened with Kavanaugh when he was nominated. There was I actually spoke to the bar while those hearings were going on. The day I spoke to the bar down in Manchester, Vermont, at their midwinter meeting, and I said, this is a spectacle of human misery that we're witnessing here. Those were the words I used, a spectacle of human misery. And now we see with Justice Jackson what happened last spring. And and one of the things that really gets my gall is that people that are perpetuating this kind of behavior in their questioning of a witness in what should be a dignified proceeding are lawyers. They're members of my profession. I mean, I can't tell you how disturbed I am about this. I was at well, you can probably tell, but I was at, I'm a member of the Conference of Chief Justices, which is a wonderful institution. And I was president a few years ago, and I love the group. I love the fact that we get together twice a year. And here we have chiefs from Texas. The chief in Texas is a good friend of mine. We have developed relationships. Again, this is across boundaries, if you will. Why? Because we come together for the same principles, which is access to justice, which is due process, which is equal justice under the law. But we're not debating immigration. We're not debating the legal issues. But what we do is get together and talk about how to solve some of the very difficult problems of making sure people can get into court to solve their problems. So the conference at the meeting in July was in Chicago. And at our business meeting, I spoke about this. And I said, I am afraid, and I think there's evidence of it here, that what goes on with the federal judicial selection process, the political theater that takes place in that process, that's live televised across the country. I had to turn it off I'll be candid. I watch C-SPAN. I don't watch the other channels. And I just could not tolerate it. It was so upsetting. It still is upsetting to me that lawyers, members of the United States Senate would try to push people's buttons in a way to embarrass them, to make for no reason other than politics. So I have this concern about this. I'm speaking to you about it this morning, not because I'm here to ask you to do something. I don't think Vermont is in the vanguard of this problem, by the way. I think to the contrary, we could, the country and the federal system could use the way we proceed with judicial selection as a goal for them to aspire to. But I think that this is a problem that we all are going to bear going forward. I don't think it's going away. I think it's something that is going to continue to be there. And I worry about the public's faith in the court system as an arbiter of their disputes, as an independent arbiter of their disputes, because of this sort of thing. So I'll stop, and I'll be happy to take your question. I'll be happy to talk about those projects too. I don't mean to.
Yeah, I certainly would like to hear a little bit about that. But I'm also curious if you have any comments about the polarizing that is happening because of some of the Supreme Court decisions are pushing issues of protecting rights or not to the states, and that we're going to have states divided really 25 and 25 on various issues such as reproductive rights. Any comment on
I don't
what that's doing?
Yeah, I don't.
The state of the country.
Once we've got, I respect every one of the people that sit on that court. I think that they are all people of goodwill and are committed to, the judicial philosophy that they have. I may not agree with the philosophy that an individual justice has, but I'm not anybody who's going to cast aspersions on how they reach the decisions that they make. There's no question in my mind that the court for several years now has been trending towards pushing issues onto the states to decide. Federalism is alive and well in this country, and it's alive and well in the federal bench. It's very much alive and well in the U.S. Supreme Court. We have reason I was in Washington in November is there's a wonderful dinner that takes place at the U.S. Supreme Court. I'd like to invite you to come. It's quite a moment, and it is a celebration. The Chief Justice hosts it. It's a celebration of a state court judge. This was begun when Rehnquist was chief, and it's in fact called the Rehnquist Dinner. And there's an award that's given to a state court judge called the Rehnquist Award for their innovation and aspiration. The woman who received it in November is a great person from Oregon, who I've gotten to know a little bit, and she well-deserved it. And she was very creative, has been very creative in, particularly in areas having to do with defendants with addiction and the like. And there are speeches that are given, and it's quite a moment. But the point I'm trying to make is that here's the court, a federal court, for all intents and purposes, I think most people would look at it as the head of all the courts in the country, state and federal. And what are they doing? They're celebrating state courts. They're celebrating state courts. So there is, I think, a very important reason for that, and that is because, as we have seen, the leaders of the federal bench in Washington are very interested in states taking on these problems themselves. The question, of course, is going to become, at what point is there a limit to the states making their own decisions about this issue or that issue? So in some areas they have tried to answer that. I don't know that they certainly have not done that across the board, not with the issue that you've mentioned. It's going to be an interesting time over the next 5 to 10 years, I would say. But elections matter, as John McCain used to say, I think. And what we've got right now is the people speaking in who they elected to important offices and the consequences of that and what the implications are. I think our jobs, yours and mine, are going to just become more and more important. I think that you are going to have more and more decisions to make on very important and difficult issues. I expect most of those are going to wind up next door in one way or another at some point. But I don't think that we are looking at the same sort of divisiveness that you're going to see in other states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and some of these states where Ohio, where actually a friend of mine just retired from, because of age, from her job as Chief Justice, and has been excoriated by some of her colleagues because she voted in a case involving redistricting, and the rest of them didn't like it.
Like Karen and then Barbara.
Yes,
Yep.
Thank you. Just on the topic of geography in different locations.
Yeah.
Because geography matters, as you said, like kind of even more than ever now, of depending where you are,
Right.
what justice or how the criminal justice system can play out. So we are also in this committee looking at it at the statewide level of how things can play out differently based on which county
Yes.
you're in.
Yeah.
I'm curious, so we're trying to tackle that in different ways
Yeah.
this session. I'm curious your thoughts on that or any words of wisdom.
So, I completely understand your concern that a defendant, for example, in a Burlington court might, for the same charge, received a different sentence than the defendant in Bennington or Brattleboro. And that's a concern we wrestle with ourselves all the time. And we try to address through training, through decisions and trying to make the decisions as clear as possible. This is the same concern in the federal courts that led to, what do they call it? Sentence, they define the sentences. I forget what the language is.
Truth in sentencing?
No, it's something else. It's like that. Martin, you know.
Yeah, I do.
It's Congress tried to actually slice very thinly what it was that your sentence was going to be if this was part of the charge. If that was part of the charge, they would look at the amount of the drugs. If we're talking about drugs, what exactly is the amount? Is it powder form or crystal form? What's the weight of it? Falco probably could answer this better than I can. But what's the name of the sentencing reform?
Guidelines?
Sentencing guidelines. Thank you. So, they've pulled them back, and the reason is, part of the strength of our system is also part of the weakness of the system, and that is that we've got human beings that are in seats like mine that are exercising discretion within the boundaries that you set in the law, which is what you're asking about. What should those boundaries be in a given statute? And you want human judgment, I think. That is a strength of the system. You want a judge to be able to take into account factors that you otherwise would not really want to list in a statute as being as compelling a certain result, because there might be a defendant who doesn't fit that same bill. I don't have a good answer for you. I'm sorry. It's a tough question, and it's something that we wrestle with. And as I say, we do a lot of training and education of the bench is top of the list. But part of this is not just the bench end of it, as I've been saying, it's also the prosecutors, it's the charging choices that prosecutors make. We see cases all the time where there's overcharging, and everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. The defense bar knows it. The judges all know it. It's overcharging, but once those choices have been made and it's in the papers that have been filed in the court, there's a process that has to be followed. It's a tough problem, but I think you're right to bring it up, and I applaud you for that. I think it ought to be something that we all are talking about and focused on, and the folks in my branch are all thinking about it, and we bring it to their attention. As a matter of fact, I'm going to talk to the judges today. I've got a Thursday noontime call with them. I'll bring this. Yeah. I'll bring it.
Share any ideas that come up.
I will. Well, I want them to know we have heard it. I guess I can use this. Okay. Sorry. That's a good question.
So actually it's funny. It's one of my questions was related to geography, but I know we're right now we're even looking at pre-trial, using diversion to keep people from getting sentenced.
Yeah, pre-charge diversion. Right.
Yes,
right.
Thank you.
Right.
So seeing the vast difference on a chart of which counties have 0 and which counties have 60, 80 referrals that they're making, to me, is part of the story that, again, probably follows up with
Right.
overcharging, et cetera. So that is concerning. And I've been thinking about it. I've had the privilege of being on judicial nominating with my esteemed colleague. for the past biennium and have served on retention. But I mean, sometimes in the like that comes up in the interviews a lot about things. And I know that we're a state that does not elect judges.
Right.
I have lived in Michigan where they do that, and it's there are pros and cons to both, I think, but we do elect prosecutors, and the fact that we elect prosecutors but not any other part of the criminal justice system, I think it's sort of it's a weird, not level playing field in a way, and I don't know if all states elect prosecutors.
Pretty much, I think.
Because again, people are like, when I go and talk to constituents, everyone is concerned about crime. But what's a soundbite about being tough on crime and what works, like a longer prison sentence is not going to help anybody. So it just feels like it's a weird dynamic. And I don't know what I'm asking, but it's like an observation that it's like, it's different, and there's only so much we can mandate, I guess, or I guess we can enact different laws. And one of the things you had talked about related to judicial nominating is I think we have it's been a really interesting and amazing process.
We have a very good process. I'm very proud of it, yeah.
And when I've looked at like best practices, like either from the Sandra Day O'Connor Institute or the Institute for Advancement of Legal Systems or the Brennan Center, in some cases, they're like, get the elected officials off of it, which I suggested at one point, and that didn't go over big with my colleagues, but...
They say put on that board. Or
more attorneys and community people, and actually judges and former judges.
Yeah.
So I'd love to continue the dialogue with you about it, because I think that there might be tweaks, that we can make.
Well, if you're talking about prosecutor, that's in the Constitution.
No, that I realize is big. That is big. And again, the other thing that I've wondered about is a lot of states have court watch programs, like public, which I think I would sit in on court as much as I could if I had the time, because every time I have, I've been blown away at, especially the treatment courts. It's amazing.
Yeah.
People always try to fight doing jury duty. And I'm like, that's like the most,
even though, most of the ones who are resistant to it, when they come out the other end, they love it. You look at the letters. I've seen some letters in the Rutland Herald over the years, and people who said, I never wanted to do this. And by the end of it, I was just enthralled with it.
I hope I get called again. It was amazing. But again, I think it would help the whole public opinion of courts if we did have more court watch. And I don't know where or how that would happen, but I guess those were just items that I wanted to discuss with you. And
well, one of the things I think that we've accomplished with the virus, and you all have accomplished with the virus, is the live streaming. I think that that's a real positive, and many of our trials now are live streamed, and many of the proceedings are live streamed. I can't cite you chapter and verse about that, but we are much more, in my mind, accessible to the public than we ever were before, which is a terrific thing. I used to, our courtroom, we've got glass doors, right? Double glass doors on the Supreme Court. There were people who visited and said, "Oh, I didn't think I could come in here." I said, "Wait a minute, this is a public proceeding. By the way, look at the glass door. You could stand outside and still witness it if you wanted to." But it's the public has a perception about the law, as I'm sure you are well aware, that is a little bit standoffish. I mean, who wants to go to court?
Right.
I understand that. And I think that's one of the challenges that we face, is to try to humanize the system, which is part of the strength of the system, even though it does at times, I'm not going to go beyond at times. I think it's at times yield some results that you would wonder about. But I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm helping.
No, I mean, you've got me thinking about a lot of things, so thank you.
Okay.
So I would like you to address, if you could, a little bit about particularly the Mental Health Commission, Commission of Mental Health and the Judiciary.
Yeah.
In part because we have some parallel work that we are doing here as far as pre-charge referrals to community justice centers. It's a little bit different as far as the goal there, as opposed to pre-charge for mental health services and the like. But if you could just touch on that and introduce it to us. We have 3 members here, myself and Karen and Barbara are each on one of the committees. To follow the proceedings and what's going on. But would love you to just kind of give an introduction for that commission.
Didn't we bring you into that?
Yes. I heard about it at the court day in Chittenden County, and asked Terry if we could be included.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. We had a good start to it last May in Burlington, where all 3 branches were invited in, and it was really very effective over 2 days. It comes out of a national project that I was co-chair of that looked at the intersection between mental health and the courts. So one of the things that I would like to make sure that you have available to you is the hyperlink to the website at the National Center for State Courts, where my committees, all the materials that we developed, and there are a lot, are posted, some of which we've actually begun to distribute here with our commission that is focused on Vermont itself. There is a pre-charge committee. Are you on that? That Tom? Karen, you're on that? That Tom Carlson is chairing?
Yes.
I have to admit, it's moving forward in fits and starts. We have some funding that we got from that's coming out of our budget. We're spending about $100,000. This is what we budgeted to have staffing from the National Center for State Courts. And there's a woman, Patty Tobias, who I've actually been in touch with just this morning about a training that they are putting together that Judge Carlson's going to attend with a psychiatrist in our state, and I can't remember the name. Harari, I think is his name, Dr. Harari. Do you all know him? I think that's his name, who was selected by, there's a group called the Judicial Psychiatrist, Judge Psychiatrist, JPLI. Anyway, they are the group that is selecting the psychiatrist, and the 2 of them are going to go to this training in May in San Francisco that is going to essentially train them on how to train judges when they come back into Vermont. So we're going to set up a training schedule after they do that. But I cannot be more specific about where Carlson's committee is right now. You might know more than I do. I am not sitting in on that committee. But this is a project that we've got. Let me give you the foundation for it. The foundation for it, as I say, comes out of the national effort. One of the things we found out in the national effort, and one of the things I am very proud of with the work that we did there, was we partnered with SAMHSA. We actually have got a tremendous working relationship with the people at the top of SAMHSA. Dr. Delphin Rittman, who is the former mental health commissioner in Connecticut, who the president put as the head of SAMHSA. So she's been there now about a year, 2 years. and she's a terrific person. She has come to our not our Vermont meetings, but our national meetings and spoken. And with her involvement, they issued guidance language just 2 weeks ago, a month ago, to all of the states, to all the executive branches of the states, that says basically when the block grant money comes out of Washington, which would be, as I understand it, in the new fiscal year, not the current fiscal year, but the next fiscal year. So after October, with a federal fiscal year, after October 1, that block grant money that's coming out for mental health, the guidance language says that, I don't want to say they must, but they are encouraged to work with the courts on how to spend that money, because there is recognition that the state court systems across this country are the second largest referral for mental health services of anybody, second only to self-referral. We're only the second. So the state court systems in the country are the second largest referral for mental health services. So this is something that they embraced when we have been in discussions with them over the last couple of years, and that resulted, as I say, in this guidance language that's coming out. Now what we're doing, and this is on me, this is my role, is trying to communicate effectively with the people at the top. So I have Terry Corsones, who you know, who is our court administrator, sent an email to Emily Hawes, I think just about 10 days ago, saying, Commissioner, there's a guidance language that's just been posted on the SAMHSA listserv. This is what it says. Can we begin to talk to you to make sure that there's coordination? And as I've said to them, and I want to say to you clearly, I'm not interested in this because I want to get in their budget. That's not what I'm trying to do. I don't want the money that they get, but what I do want to accomplish is that we have more effective means of diverting people out of the justice system. I want my caseload to go down. We've got a backlog issue, as all of you are well aware. I sat in on and listened to the live stream of your joint committee meeting last week and was very happy that you did that. I think there needs to be a bright light that is shown on this problem. And I know it's, we need to be accountable for this, and I think we are being accountable, but it doesn't fix it. So we're hard at work at that, as you've heard. So I'm not trying to get into anybody's pocket. What I want to do is find better ways. And I'm going to tell you that the answer to this. I mean, you all know the answer to this. It's services. That's the problem. That's the problem. And, you probably have better examples of this than I do, but I know this is 4 or 5 years old, but it's a good example. 4 or 5 years ago, there were fewer doctors, fewer MDs in Burlington, Vermont, one of the highest income levels, not just in the state, but probably in the country. So you've got a lot of high-end MDs. There were fewer doctors in that city than there were in Brattleboro or some other town in Vermont that were willing to take Medicaid patients. And as a result of that, the wait times, and I know you got a wait time report a year ago. I've got that report. I was very interested in that report. The wait times for patients, particularly Medicaid patients in the marginalized communities in this state, the wait times were longer than any other place in the state. This is a problem of services, and this is a place where maybe I mean, I'm not smart enough to say, I have no idea how you could fix that, but I would think there might be a law. By the way, if I could divert off of something else, could I just, for 5 minutes? We've got a problem perpetually with security in the courts. And I love the sheriffs. I love law enforcement in this state. we've got terrific people who are doing this, and Representative Byrd has already heard my speech about this, but we negotiate 14 annual contracts with 14 separate sheriffs every year to get court security. And it is a struggle. They don't really, many of them, I don't want to say all, because many of them are of a different mind, but they need to be paid. There's no question about that. But there would be some change in how we negotiate in the relationship we have. If you guys would pass a bill that says the sheriff, this is all it has to say, the sheriff in every county shall provide security for the courts in its county. Don't change the funding stream. Still comes through our budget. Okay, we'll do that. But you pass a law that says the sheriff in every county shall provide security for the courts in its county. And I think that would change the dynamic for this problem. And I'll go back to the other issue now, but I'd be happy to answer questions about that. But this is not going away.
Certainly have heard about.
I know you. Yeah.
Karen.
Yes, so I don't have a question on the sheriff.
Yeah.
Although we have a sheriff on our committee, so maybe there are questions about that.
Where, what county?
Chittenden right now.
Chittenden?
Yes.
We should talk. We should talk. Who's the head of the organization?
Kevin McLaughlin right now.
Kevin
Soon to
McLaughlin.
be Dan Gamlin.
Yeah. What do you think? All right.
Sorry.
We'll talk.
All right.
But my question is on the mental health piece of it, because I agree that it's a mess and that we need to work on it, chip away at it from all different perspectives. Judiciary piece of it, but the mental health piece of it, the healthcare system, there's many different pieces. I'm curious your thoughts of, I think sometimes when folks have a criminal charge or conviction, that kind of rises folks to the top of the list to maybe have access to services, to have people focus on it, which
Is that true? I didn't know that.
I'm curious your thoughts on that. Do you see that with people? Because I feel like that is not helpful, right? If it takes somebody getting a crime in order to get access to services.
That's something I've never heard of. I've never heard about before. I mean, it's an interesting point because I can understand maybe that is the case, but I don't know that it is the case.
Well, I'm just saying with the referrals, so it's that people are getting referred more, so that's getting them connected to the service. I'm just thinking like there's something that needs
Well,
to
they
happen
get referred, but I'm not so sure that they're getting the service. One of my daughters is an RN, and I happened to be talking to her last night. She and we've got a 2-year-old grandson, Robbie. They were over for dinner. Her husband's a fireman in Rutland City, and he was on duty. But I was talking to Abigail about she's studying for a master's in nursing and is doing her practical now up in Bradford and in St. Johnsbury. She was telling, I asked her about the mental health, and her practical is in a general practice in each of those towns. And the practice apparently in Bradford is across the street from the high school. And she was telling me about the mental health problems that they see in the clinic with kids. And I said, well, what about services in the community? She said, the waiting lists are so long that essentially what we're doing is we're maintaining these kids in the general practice with professionals like her, but do not have that specialized training. She was telling me she actually is going to apply for a mental health certificate after she gets her second degree. But there's so few people in the state. Now, listen, one of the things I tout to my colleagues about you guys is the fact that your oversight of healthcare is in many ways, and I wish this wasn't being recorded because I could have said something that's more effective than how we regulate the profession. And I'll give you the example that I have in mind. And the example is that we don't have enough dentists in this state. I had to have a tooth extracted in Burlington by Dr. Huber months ago. You know who gave me the Novocaine shot? It wasn't an MD. It was one of the technicians who, as I understand it, under the law, because you created another level of licensure in that profession, was obviously trained. I mean, it went very well. It went fine. It's obviously trained, and she is, so this is an example of what we need in the state, I think, more. And one of the things I was very disappointed to read in that wait time report a year ago, February of 22, I think, was the fact that the federal government does not recognize for reimbursement trained drug and alcohol counselors. I mean, and I've been whining about this to my friends involved in this national project I've been in, who don't have any answers about it. It's an example of where government is not providing the services that the people need, I think, in order to try to bring the numbers down of those who are in crisis. And we've got a lot of people who are in that area, unfortunately.
Coach. Chief.
Coach.
Great to see you.
It's great to see you always.
On the recovery side, and as far as that licensing piece,
Yeah.
and we are trying, to look at that. What we know for a fact, is that the recovery coaches that they have, in the state, have the highest, let's say, recidivism numbers of any of the counselors, because they come out of that system.
Yeah.
There's a guy that asked me to help him get a reference so that he could do AA in the.
You're saying this is a positive?
It's a positive, but we need to bring it up to steroid level. Okay. Because there are more of them, but the process of getting them like into situations that are helpful takes almost an act of Congress. I have a gentleman that I've known for 37 years. We came into recovery at the same time. So he's been in recovery for 37 years. He has helped more people,
right.
Okay, over that time period. And to get him into Springfield Correctional Center, he has to have 3 references, an FBI check. And in the old days, we just go, as long as you weren't carrying or, you had an ID and you weren't, anything, the rules have gotten more restricted.
Yeah.
For folks to help, in that way.
Well, one of the things we're looking at with the mental health project is peer support. Now, I heard at one point from Judge Grierson when before he retired, that there were folks in the legislature in your body that were not enthusiastic about a peer support idea. Why, I don't know. Where that was, that the pushback was coming from, I don't know either. But we are looking at it, and we may make some suggestions to you. There are states, and Texas again I'll cite, that have very robust peer support programs where they actually have got peers in the courts themselves, people who are there not just to help with the process, but to help outside of court as well. And they've got training programs. They've got a tremendous structure around this, apparently in many of the Western states where they're way ahead of us on this idea of peer support. Why it has not landed here in a more robust way, I'm not sure. But we're looking at it, and we may wind up coming up with some good ideas.
Well, right now, there are training programs available within the state in every county. Again, the problem comes to our legislative policy piece that we haven't been able to, to move.
Right.
Over the last few years. But I have a feeling with this new legislature, when I say new, it's real new.
Yeah.
60 new members. I think that discussion might rise.
Good.
But thanks for your support.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, along the lines of what Coach was talking about, I was at breakfast this morning with Recovery Vermont.
Yeah.
Where was all the turning point.
Great people.
They got that system up and running as far as all the volunteers go.
Yeah.
They're grossly underfunded.
Are they?
They're almost 100% publicly funded. The only money that they got was, or they get, or maybe even just got, I think it was last year, the year before, each of the 14 recovery centers got $45,000. But all that did is replace money that they had already lost. And one thing that they were advocating for, they were advocating for state money.
Yeah.
And one of the big reasons is because, it's most of their people are volunteers, but they do have paid employees that are not even close to the average
minimum wage.
They have no benefits at all.
Right.
They don't even get a day off paid. So that's what they're advocating for. And if they, if we can get that for them, that system will grow even more.
It's a great point. They were at the drug court.
Yes.
At Valenti's drug court when I was there, and she gave a speech to all of the people that were gathered in the back of the room and talked to them about how, they want to, we're here to help you, and they're right across the street.
Right. Yeah. And they do great work.
Yeah.
I was a little bit involved with them. My nephew used to work down there.
It's a good place.
He hopes to go back. He left and misses it and hopes to go back. But
good for him.
Question I don't know if it's a question or not. You talked about the drug court a few minutes ago, and this may be a question for Terry or Judge Zone more than you. But a number of years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, as you probably know, the drug court in Rutland was on the verge of closing.
That's why I went. I heard it was getting better, and it is.
Okay.
Ian Sullivan's doing a great job. Let me just say that. Ian is the new state's attorney. He was there. One of the things I love, they didn't know I was coming. And Ian is there himself. Public defender is there, obviously, but Ian is there himself. And to me, that makes a statement that his office is committed to this. Listen, I understand that it's resource intensive. There's no question about that. But it's one afternoon every other week. And you've got a community that's got this problem. And if we were to do the economics on it, the comparative economics on it, what the state is spending to put somebody in jail and hold them in jail for 6 months as compared to getting them treatment, putting more money into those folks across the road there. There's a lot of common sense to that sort of analysis, it seems.
And when we were down in Rutland for the legislative court day,
Thanks for coming. Thank you for coming.
Great education.
Yeah.
But after everybody was gone, I was talking with John in the hallway, probably for Judge Valenti.
Judge Valenti.
And he's so excited about
about
being the drug court judge. He really is.
I know.
He's coming up.
He got
ideas for incentives.
You know how we wound up. Nancy Waples was appointed to my court, and Nancy had been running that drug court. And Zone picked up the phone and called Valenti and said, I need your help. And he did it, and now he's very invested and never had an idea about how it ran, and is a big supporter. So I think that's a common story for people who actually witness it. It's going well, and I'm really pleased about that, particularly because of Judge McCaffrey's tenure there and his memory, which is so strong still.
And the last thing is Judge Cohen holding his own over?
No, he's
not.
yeah.
He's got retention coming up again.
I'm going to say, listen, I got a whole lot to say about him and retention.
Yeah. Tell him that I'm going to try to get back on retention and get him again.
Right. Yeah, well, look, I'm going to warn.
Because I zinged him good the first time.
Good of you to mention him. He's always close to me.
I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Driver. I think we're going to probably it's going to be after crossover, depending on what we see from the Senate. But I think that we are going to try to come and watch a Supreme Court argument at some point.
Oh, that'd be terrific.
Well, but it probably won't be before the crossover.
All right. We'd love to have. We would be pleased and proud to have you in the courtroom, and bring your friends when you come. We like it. It's a special day when we have an audience. We don't have that very often. So thank you for everything you guys do. I really do appreciate it. I know that you've got difficult choices to make, and I appreciate you listening to us.
Absolutely.
Making those
I'd
choices.
like to have you over.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
As always,
Thank you.
So we're going to go.
What do you think about that idea?
Go offline for about 5 minutes.
You would?
I used to negotiate some of those contracts.
You are?
I was the chief deputy for
Take a
county
brief
for a while
break.
before the last.
You guys are a different kettle of fish.